here for our cute class on how to make a knitted cup cozy. Welcome everybody. A couple quick things before we start. My name's Claire. I'm going to be hanging out in the chat, answering any questions there. So if you do have questions, please pop them in the chat button. And another thing, we're going to be putting the patterns in there. And then it's a special thank you for I Love Yarn Day. Michael's is also giving away an SVG file for your Cricut or your Silhouette or your other paper cutting machines. So we can save that. Darren's modeling the cup cozy as wrist warmer. There's a new use for it. All right, and I'm going to let him take it away from here.
Okay, so this two options. You've got a lion or a bear that we're going to do. The lion is worked in the round. But once you decide if you're going to work in the round or work flat, you can make the base of the cup cozy, and then you can decide which face or which animal you want to put on it. So they're interchangeable, really. I just did two different kinds to show two different ways. So this one's not seamed yet. I'm going to show you how to seam it. But if you made the flat cup cozy, you could totally put the lion on this one, and you can make one in the round and put the bear on this one. So always good options depending on what you like to do better. So let's switch to the overhead camera so I can demonstrate, and we will start. Hopefully the volume will be good in this class because I have had problems with volume in my other classes. First thing I want to mention is there is a mistake when we're talking about gauge. 16 stitches equal 4 inches. And it says granny stitch, which is somehow got put in there by mistake. It should read stockinette stitch. So if you have the printed pattern, just cross that out. Go ahead and write stockinette stitch in there. Granny stitch is a crochet stitch, which is not used for this cup cozy. So there's that. If you're going to make it a flat one, then you need straight needles. I'm using a size 9. You can use a size 8 or a 9 depending on your stitch gauge. The yarn that I'm using is Heartland. I'm using Heartland yarn by Lion Brand, and this is available on lionbrand.com or on michaels.com. And the colors I'm using this brown, which is called Sequoia, and this orange, which is Yosemite, and this yellow, which is called Yellowstone, and they're named after state parks. And this one is Black Canyon Tweed, just for a little detail work. So according to our pattern, look here. So if you're going to make the one that's flat, it wants us to cast on 42 stitches, and we're going to work knit 2, purl 2 rib for 1.5 inches. You can make it a little longer or a little shorter if you want. Quickly, I am going to review the cast on just in case people need the knitted on cast on. You start off just like a regular knit stitch. You enter the stitch, wrap the yarn, bring the yarn through, pull up a loop, and then if you're casting on, you want to take this loop from your right hand needle, pick it up backwards. So you're going to jump over the loop, pick it up, and transfer it to the left hand needle. You don't want to pull it tight, but you do want to make it a little snug. Again, the cast on is enter the stitch, wrap the yarn, pull up a loop, and then you're going to take your left hand needle, you're going to leapfrog over the stitch, come back towards your thumb, and then go up your needle and pick that loop up, transfer it over. Any questions about the cast on? Pretty straightforward. So you cast on 42 stitches, and I'm going to show you how to work ribbing quickly as a review. So the knit stitch, we're going to do knit 2, purl 2, rib. So you enter the stitch, wrap the yarn, bring the loop through, transfer it over to the other needle. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now to do the purl stitch, you have to come to a full stop, open up your needles, bring your working yarn to the front of your work so you're ready to do a purl. And now we kind of dive into the stitch this direction. So you enter the purl stitch from the top, wrap your yarn, kind of push that yarn back through the loop, transfer it over. So that is the purl stitch. 2 purls, come to a full stop, move your yarn into the position to do a knit stitch, and do your 2 knits. Now it's very important between the knits and the purls, you come to a full stop, bring your yarn in between the needles, and position it in the right position to do whichever stitch you're going to do. So do we have any questions about casting on or how to work our ribbing? Questions about that? Doing good? Okay.
I think we're doing good. I just wanted to mention, if anybody does need help with knitting basics, you can go back to michaels.com/classes, and we did a knitting 101 class. So if you want to start from the very beginning.
So I'm going to review quickly knitting in the round. So that if you choose to make it in the round, then you'll be able to do it this way. So we're going to cast on 40 stitches for knitting in the round. And we're going to work knit 2, purl 2 ribbing for 1.75 inches again. So it's pretty much the same. So I've cast on. So casting on would be exactly the same for knitting in the round or knitting flat. So you can cast on all of your stitches on one of the double points. And then after you get them cast on, you can divide them across 3 different needles. So, and if you divide 40 by 3, you do not get a nice even number. So what you do is you just space them out as even as possible. So there's 13, 13, and 14 is what it ends up as, but it doesn't have to be exactly even, just not too uneven if possible. So you want to lay it out like this, make sure your stitches are not twisted. So you kind of want to form a U shape, making sure that your stitches are all lined up nicely and facing the same direction. Your working yarn should be coming from the right-hand side. And if it's coming from the right-hand side, the very first time you knit a stitch, you will join your work. So my working yarn's on my right-hand side. I'm going to enter this stitch with my 4th double point, wrap the yarn, whoops, actually bring it through. Okay, do my 2nd knit. And when you're doing your first 2 stitches, you want to pull them a little more snug than you normally would to kind of close up that gap. And then you want to stop for a minute and you want to make sure that you actually joined it. So you can see here that piece strand of yarn is joining my 2 sides together. Now you wouldn't want to put that loose because you're going to end up with a gap now, but just so you can see, that's how you double check. Just make sure that it's joined. And I brought my yarn to the front to do my 2 purls. So at this point, you would work ribbing the exact same way. You do 2 knits and 2 purls. And between your knits and purls, you come to a full stop and then reposition your yarn from the front to the back and bring it from the back to the front so that you are having it in the right position. Okay, any questions about joining your work in the round or knitting ribbing? Doing okay with that?
I think we're doing good with that.
All right. So now the next major difference between knitting in the round and knitting with flat needles is if you're going to work stockinette stitch, which after we're done our ribbing, it wants us to work stockinette stitch for 25 rows. So you're going to count your rows and make sure you have at least 25 rows. It's very important, and I'll show you why coming up. But for stockinette stitch, when you're working flat, pretend I finished all of my ribbing, and for stockinette stitch, you would do all of your knits. You would finish the row with all knits. So super easy. And I'm not going to knit clear to the end because I don't want to waste your life watching me do knit stitches. But you knit all the way to the end. So pretend I finished. I went all the way to the end. And now I'm going to work back. So on the back side of your work, you'll put all purls on the back. So when you're working flat and you're working stockinette stitch, you do knits on one side. When you finish the row and you work back, you'll do purls on the other side. So all knits on one side and all purls on the other side. Very easy. And then you'll end up with stockinette stitch. Now, working stockinette stitch in the round is very easy. When you're working in the round, as the name implies, you're going round and round in circles. And so you never end up on the back of your work. So when you're working flat, you're working on the front and then you're working on the back. But you're working in the round, you're always working on the front of your work. So for stockinette stitch in the round, you just do knit stitches. You never have to do a purl stitch for stockinette stitch in the round. So you just keep doing knit stitches. And I do want to get to the other needles so I can show you how to change needles as a review, if you need that. So get to the end of my needle. Okay. So now I've finished with this needle. I've got all the stitches off of it. And so with this one, I kind of want to move the stitches away from the end. Position this needle so that it's ready to go. I've got my working yarn coming from that previous needle. And I'm going to take the free needle that I freed up. This one has no stitches, and that becomes my new working needle. So I just enter the stitch. Bring it through. And then here's, every time you switch to a different needle, you do want to pull the first two stitches a little more snug than you normally would. Nothing crazy, but we don't want to have a gap there. So if you pull them just a little more snug than normal, that'll help close up that gap for the first two. Okay, so any questions about stockinette stitch, how it contrasts from knitting flat or knitting in the round, and then any more help with knitting in the round? Have you guys used double points before? So they're a little fiddly when you first start out, but once you get the hang of them, it's not so bad. Okay, how are we doing, Claire? Any questions?
We're doing good. I feel like we've got an advanced group here, or everyone's just riveted by watching you knit.
All right. Well, all right. So now let's look at our. So we're ready to jump into the duplicate stitch, which might be the main thing people are interested in. So the pattern's quite simple to do. You cast on 40 stitches or 42, you work your ribbing, you repeat your ribbing for 1.75 inches or however you want. If you have a certain water bottle or a cup or like a mug that you want to make it to go around, you can make it a little bit longer or a little bit shorter if you are trying to measure something to work. And then you just end it. After you do your stockinette stitch, you end it with knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, and it's very easy. You bind off loosely. You don't want it to be a tight bind off. You want it to be stretchy to fit around the bottle. And then we're going to work. This is the face for the lion. And this is the face for the bear. And the reason you need to knit at least 25 rows of stockinette stitch is because the chart needs, right here, it ends at row 22. So you want to have a few stitches above so that you're not going right into the ribbing if you don't need to. So it gives you a little bit of cushion. You see this one's the same. Row number 23, there's nothing. But with this guy, we need to have extra room because we're going to put the mane around it. So you need a couple of extra stitches so that we have room to put the mane. So that's why I want you to knit at least 25. Probably the very least, you'd have to do 22, but you don't want it to go right into the very edge of the ribbing, probably. So reading a chart is actually very easy, but this will come into play if you're reading a chart for cables, Fair Isle, lace. Pretty much all knitted charts are read the same way. You start down here where it says number 1, and you work across. And then because this one was done flat, you go across, and then you go up, and then you go back across this direction. And then you go up. So you just kind of work in a zigzag up, following each square. And then the white squares, of course, are your background color. And then the colored squares are going to be the color we're working with. Now the same is true on the lion. If you were knitting this in the round and you weren't doing duplicate stitch, then it would be written a little bit different for being in the round. But because we're doing duplicate stitch, it equals to where we're working flat. So you start here and you go across. So basically the first 2 rows don't have anything. So you'd really start here and you would start there with your color work. So let me show you how you do the duplicate stitch. I'm going to demonstrate on the back of this lion one. Okay, now you can really start anywhere you want. Once you finish your cozy, once you seam it together, you can really start anywhere you want. You usually want the seam to be in the back. So that's pretty much all you need to do is just kind of make sure the seam is going to be in the back. Okay, so for duplicate stitch, you want to find wherever you're going to start, but you do want to make sure you're finding a knit stitch. So you want to, there we go.
There we go. Yes, I was just going to say, since you zoomed in, you got to recenter.
That is a knit stitch right there. And the knit stitch is 2 strands of yarn that fit together and create a V shape. So that is your knit stitch right there. What you don't want to do is get off half and half. A situation like that where it's an upside down V or shaped like an A, that is half of one stitch and half of another stitch. You don't want to be working with that. You want to make sure you're looking at that or you're seeing the V. And it seems like a simple thing, but once you start into this, sometimes it can get hard to keep track of where you are. So just making sure you're always looking at that V, okay? And then another thing you need to make sure you're focusing on is what stitch are you duplicating? So again, it seems like a silly thing to say, but once you get into it, you'll realize sometimes it's hard to keep track of where you are. So you come from the bottom. I'm going to bring my needle, oops, sorry, right there we go. I'm going to bring my needle right up there. And then you want to make sure you're leaving enough of a tail in the back so that you'll be able to weave that in later. So leave a tail for the back for weaving in. Okay. So I'm going to be duplicating this stitch right here. So here and here. So there's a couple ways of looking at this when you're doing it. So the way I like to do it is I like to go to the stitch right up above, and I pick up both legs of that stitch right up above, just like that, and then pull that through. And you don't want to pull it tight. You do kind of want to keep your tension nice and even. So sometimes I'll put my thumb on the string that I'm working with and kind of pull it to kind of get any slack out of it, but without pulling it too tight, like this. So now what has happened is I have duplicated half of that stitch. So now I'm going to go back down the exact same place that I originally came up. I'm going to show this several times so you can see exactly what's happening. All right, so now what you can see is that I've created a new stitch on top of the old stitch. So that's what it means by duplicate stitch. I'm duplicating the stitch, but in a new color. All right, so now I want to do the stitch up above it. Or I'll do the one beside it, because that's kind of how the chart reads from side to side. So in the same row, you want to make sure you're coming. See how there's a little hole there? You enter the fabric through that hole, the bottom of the point, and then you pick up both legs of the stitch that's above it. Pull it. You don't want to pull it tight, so I kind of put my thumb there and kind of hold the tension and kind of pull it a little. And then you go back in the place you originally came up through. So I'm going to go back down through there. Any of this making sense? And so now I have duplicated 2 stitches. And so if we look at this chart, you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We need to do 7 stitches across to make the base of the neck. And then we need to do 3 stitches high. So do 7, 7, 7. So that's how we would progress. Now let me show you a few other things you can do. Okay. So I'm going to bring my needle up to the front through the base of the stitch that I'm duplicating. And I'm going to pick up both legs of the stitch right above it, pull my needle through. Now I'm going to go back down through the exact same stitch spot that I came up through my fabric, but instead of just pushing that down through the back, I'm going to go ahead and bring it up at the base of the next stitch that I want to duplicate. And it makes it a little bit easier for me to continue and do the next one. See, now I've duplicated that stitch. And the thing about this, now my yarn is in the right position to just go ahead and keep moving to do the next one. So I'm going to pick up both legs of the stitch above it. I'm going to go back down through the exact same hole that I came in, but I'm going to go ahead right now and bring my needle. See, this is where I need to double check and make sure I bring up the right spot. Bring my needle to the base of the stitch I want to duplicate next. So I'm going to go down through here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this will be my 7. So now at this point, I've done all my 7 stitches across. I'm going to go back down through the space where I came up from that stitch, and I'm going to bring my needle to the stitch above. So see how I'm doing that. I'm going back down here to that'll give me the duplication for the second part of that stitch. And the next stitch I need to duplicate is this one. So that's why I bring it here at the base of the stitch on the next row up. And I'm going to kind of use my thumb to guide it in place. And now, because I'm moving back that direction, I like to enter the stitch from this side. And here's where sometimes it's easy to make a mistake. So let me show you this. So this is, I came up here. So this is where I'm going to go right back down. And the next stitch that I'm going to duplicate is, the next stitch I'm going to duplicate is this one right here. So that's why I say, make sure you know what stitch you're duplicating. Now, for some reason, my natural instinct is I want to bring my needle up here, which is a mistake. You want to bring your needle up right at the base of the stitch you're going to duplicate. I'm not sure why, but I always feel like that's where I want to be. I guess I feel like I've already worked through this hole on my previous row, so maybe I feel like it's finished. But that's a mistake that's easy to make. Sometimes you'll go through the wrong place, which will end up being the stitch above. So you want to make sure you're coming through right at the base of the stitch that you want to duplicate. And then I like to kind of reposition that with my thumb and make sure I'm tightening it so it's laying just in the right place. Pick up the 2 legs of the stitch above the one you want to duplicate. And then back down through the base of the stitch where you originally came up. And you want to bring your needle to the front of your work at the very base. Always remember you're going to the base or the bottom point of the V that you're duplicating next. So that gives me a duplicate stitch there. Pick up the 2 legs, stitch above, re-enter your fabric at the base of the stitch you're duplicating, bring it up, bring your needle to the top of your fabric, at the base, at the bottom point of the stitch you're going to duplicate next. And then just keep moving across just like so. How do we feel about that? Any questions about how I'm doing this?
I have a question for you. On a larger piece like this, or you're going to use so many stitches, would it make sense to use stitch markers to sort of outline the area where you're duplicate stitching?
Yeah, I love a stitch marker, and I use a lot of stitch markers. I usually don't use them for that, but I think that is actually a very good idea. So you could kind of pre-count like where you need like the outline of it, and you could, you know, put quite a few stitch markers or just a few to mark different areas. It is easy. I will tell you this: it's easy to lose track of where you are. So sometimes it's a good idea to like every time you finish a row to kind of stop and reevaluate where you are in your work. Um, Sometimes it is easy to lose track.
Yeah. And speaking of losing track and time, we've got about 15 minutes left here. I'm going to pop both of these patterns in the chat once again, in case anyone hasn't received them yet.
So no questions about this duplicate stitch? Everyone's got it.
It's very mesmerizing just to sit here and watch you do it. It's very calming.
It's actually fun to do. I mean, sometimes it can be a little stressful and you get a little anxious doing something. But if you don't lose track where you are, if you manage to stay on track, it's actually very calming. Now, just a little bit of general information about duplicate stitch. If you were to buy, or if maybe you've knitted something in the past, you have a Stockinette Stitch sweater, maybe you buy a Stockinette Stitch sweater from the store or a thrift shop, you could totally duplicate stitch something, you know, just go get any chart, any Fair Isle or Intarsia chart, or just you could draw up your own, and you can put duplicate stitch design on anything. You want to try to get yarn that's pretty much the same size, maybe slightly larger. But other than that, you can make any kind of duplicate stitch design on any existing item that you have, which is a lot of fun to do. Also, if you have a knitted item that has a hole in it or a weak spot, like where it's like working into a hole, you can totally duplicate stitch, buy some yarn that looks very similar to the yarn that you originally made it out of, and totally duplicate stitch a patch in the same color yarn so that you can repair something either once it has a hole or right before a hole like really forms. So that's a couple of other really good uses for duplicate stitch. And like how this yarn's laid here. So I'm going to take it out and try it again.
Tina had a question on how you would change color. And I think in the lion chart, we have a different color where his eyes are. And I think for the bear too.
Okay, so changing color, basically all you do is you skip over you just, like I'm working with the brown, and you just duplicate stitch only the stitches for the brown. And then when it comes time to use a different color, you go back in and do the stitches in a different color. So you can skip over them and come back and do them later, or you can like finish the row in brown, come back and do the stitches in a cream color, and then move on. You can kind of do them both at the same time or finish them up. But they really don't involve each other as much as you think when you're switching colors. You just, whenever you're starting or stopping a color in duplicate stitch, you want to make sure you're leaving yourself enough of a tail so that you can securely weave that in after. That's the main thing you want to remember. And with this one, actually, the way the chart is written or drawn, you're only using brown, and then the other colors that are left behind are the background color. But what I actually did, because I didn't like the way it turned out, was once I did the brown, I went back with duplicate stitch with the original background color and redid the stitches to make the nose, the eyes, and the ears stand out nice and even. So that way it looked more even, because the brown duplicate stitch, the thickness of the yarn kind of infringed upon the stitches next to them and kind of took up a little bit of space. So when I went back over them and did duplicate stitch with the same color that they already were, it kind of helped to fill in that space and to hold the space better for the eyes, the nose, and the ears. So that's one thing that I did, but you wouldn't have to do that if you didn't want to.
Yeah, and that way you could put the bear on any color background you wanted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, another thing I want to show you on my bear, I did a French knot for the nose because I wanted to have a more three-dimensional nose, and then I put a little tuft of hair. So I'm going to show you how to do the French knot for the nose, and then I'm going to show you how to do this hair, but that's the exact same way that you do the lion's mane. So show you that now. If there are no more questions about how to do the duplicate stitch, it's really very easy. It does take practice, but most things with knitting, it takes practice. And if you start it and you don't like how it looks, you can easily take it out and give it another go. Like, it's not going to ruin your fabric if you don't like how it turned out. Okay, so I'm going to just bring my working yarn up here so I can demonstrate how to do the French knot for the nose. Okay. So you bring your yarn to the front of your fabric, and then you wrap the yarn around the needle. I probably did a bunch because I like the big nose on him. So let's do 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you don't take the needle back through the exact same hole. You go like 1 strand of yarn over when you go back down. And when you pull that through, kind of put your thumb on those strands of yarn that you wrapped when you pull it through, and pull it until it feels like it's tight. And then you have that nice knot. And then one thing you can do, you don't have to be finished yet. You don't quite like how it looks. You can bring your yarn back to the front. See, there's kind of a loop there where I don't really like that loop, but just kind of sew through it and just kind of re-secure it. All right. And then if you really want to make it kind of stand out, one thing you can do is wrap your yarn around the base of it once or twice. And then take it back down. Technically, I don't know if any of that stuff is technically correct, but I like to do things the way I like to do them. And as you can see, I feel like that, oh, where are we? I feel like by doing that, it gives it just a little more definition and makes it stand out just a little more. And I kind of like that for the nose. Any questions about the French knot? You want to see it again?
I think we should probably move on to our mane and our fringe, and then we'll see if we've got any questions. We're just over 5 minutes left.
Okay. Oh gosh, that time really moves by fast, doesn't it? I want to do it with my scissors. Okay, so for the mane, so what I've done is I have threaded my needle with the orange and the gold at the same time, and I'm doubling it, so I'm actually going to be using 4 strands at a time. That just makes things go a little faster. Very easy to do. So you're just going to pick up 2 strands of yarn, and you don't really at this point have to worry about if you're picking up a knit stitch or if you're picking up half of one and half of the other one. Doesn't make any difference. So I don't really recommend picking up just 1 strand because it tends to want to snag. So if you pick up 2 strands with your needle, pull it through, and you want to leave it a little bit longer than what you're going to want it because you're going to trim it after. If you do it too short, then you may end up being sorry later. So all I'm doing is just tying it in a nice secure knot. Nothing fancy. I would probably just do it once. You can do it twice if you really want it to be super secure, and then just cut it. And then you just keep going. So you can see here, did 1 row or 2. I think I just did 1 row all the way around. But because you're using so much yarn, you can do it on every stitch, or you can do it every other stitch, depending on how much of a mane or how thick you want it to be. But I probably would do it on every stitch. So basically, you're just making these tassels like that. Any questions about that? And then for the bear, for the little tuft of hair on the bear's head, I just left them really short, and then I went back and kind of unraveled them a little bit like this to make them look a little more like curly hair. So, any questions about that situation? Most things in knitting they might look more complicated, but they're almost always very easy, much easier than you think they're going to be. There's really no wrong way to do this as long as they're tied securely. And then, if you make this cup cozy the base, you can find any chart you like. You could do a pumpkin face for Halloween. You could do holly leaves for, Christmas, or do a Hanukkah design or something, put a heart for Valentine's Day. You can do anything you want. Makes it very versatile. Any questions, Claire?
I think we're all good. Sounds like everyone had fun watching you duplicate stitch there.
This group was very advanced. No questions at all.
Yes. And just a reminder that if you do want to go back and watch this class again, it was recorded. So you can see it probably coming up tomorrow at michaels.com/classes.
And I do think they make great, you can wear them as wrist warmers. Wouldn't that be fun? Crazy with hand warmers? I don't know, maybe not. If you have any questions, look for me on Instagram. It's Mr. Woolly Bear, M-I-S-T-E-R, Woolly Bear. Send me a direct message and I can get back with answers to your questions if you need any help.